Okay.
All right, everybody, welcome to another Sales Class live session. We are super fortunate to have Allan Langer here with us. His background and experience is so amazing and so rich. We can definitely learn so much from him at this time. So if you haven't already, please subscribe to the Sales Class platform. You'll be able to see the recording of our discussion there, as well as make sure to connect directly with Allan and follow up with him. Right. So, as a friend of mine always says, learning is earning. So, if we're not learning something new, we're probably not earning any more than we did, I don't know, a year ago or so, minus the COVID pandemic. So, that's the only COVID joke I will make right now, ever. So, because I don't know if we're there yet. All right. So, Allan, thank you for joining us today. And you and I had a chance to talk, holy cow, a couple months ago at this point.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah, it feels like it, but it doesn't. I think time still has that weird feeling about it right now. But and thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. Your background is amazing. Love your sales background and your methodology, mindset, and approach to our very noble profession, I will say. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Dionne. It's a pleasure to be here. And as people are joining and stuff, I'll treat this as a recording, so I won't be asking questions or anything like that because people might be popping in. But what I decided to do today was I have a book called The 7 Secrets to Selling More by Selling Less, and I can give an entire day's worth of training on all the 7 secrets. But what I found pretty helpful in these half-hour type of talks is to go over 2 or 3 of the secrets that many salespeople either ask me questions about or they struggle with. And these 3 that I'm going to go over today seem to be the ones that resonate quite a bit with salespeople as stuff that they can literally start using tomorrow. Because this is not, as we all know, sales is not rocket science, but it is emotional science. And if you don't know how to connect with your customer on an emotional level and using how the human brain works, you're just going to be a typical salesperson. So let me share my screen and we'll get into it. All right. So I title this talk, "Ugh, let's talk about sales," because nobody likes to talk about sales, especially if you're a solopreneur. I'm not sure what the audience will be here, but I do get a lot of solopreneurs joining some talks. And one of the biggest struggles I see is people can really deliver their product. They can deliver what they do, whether it's a product or a service, but they don't know how to sell it right, or they don't know how to actually ask for the order when they're on the call or in front of someone showing that product to them. And one of the barriers of that is they don't want to sound like a salesperson. And it's such a typical perception. So that's what I'm going to kind of go over today, how we kind of got there and really ways to get over that. So here's a question I have for the folks who are watching now and who are going to be watching. And the question is a simple one. Do you like yourselves personally? Do you like meeting with a salesperson?
No.
Exactly. And we are salespeople on this call, or we're business owners on this call. So we're all salespeople, but it's an amazing conundrum. It's an amazing thing that happens in this world that everybody has to buy something, but nobody wants to meet with the person who buys it. And here's a little survey I did. When I was writing my book, I wrote my entire book in a little coffee shop in my town. And I wanted to see why this was happening. And I wanted to see if this was like something that maybe I was just thinking, or is it a real problem? So for 2 weeks, I asked everyone that walked in the front door that question. Do you like meeting with a salesperson? All 231 said no. I didn't get a maybe. I didn't get sure. I got emphatic, no way, never. I hate salespeople. Like people would expound upon the answer. So 100% of people, and I could have probably kept going and everyone would have said no. And here's one of my favorite quotes I've ever read. And it's a quote that makes you laugh, but it's true because of perception is reality. Woody Allen said, there are worse things in life than death. Have you ever spent an evening with an insurance salesman? This is the perception that people have. Like, I need insurance, oh my God, I got to call the guy or I got to call the girl to come over, and you don't want to go through that experience. So the question is, how did we get here? How did we get to this point where people hate us? They hate the sales profession. And rather than just keep talking about, well, people hate salespeople, people do this, I actually kind of coined a term in my book. It's a tongue-in-cheek term, but it's really a fear. It's like you get this knot in your stomach. You get this feeling like, I don't want to go to the car dealership because I have to deal with the sales guy. I don't want to go to the mattress store because I have to deal with the salesperson. And I call this fear, like I said, kind of a funny term, but I call it Riptotrostophobia. And this is something that everybody has.
And Elaine White, you nail it every time.
Oh, we got, all right, there we go.
Sorry, Jen,
We're muted now.
Yeah.
Riptotrostophobia is the fear of meeting with a salesperson or anybody trying to sell anything. And it's not something you're born with. It's something that happened to you at some point in your life, normally when you're a younger person, or you saw your parents deal with a bad salesperson. And you get this event, this riptotrostophobic event, I call it. And it just plants this seed in your brain that every salesperson is out for themselves. They're only out for their commission check, and they don't want to, they don't care about you at all. And it's completely, it keeps going today with all of these funnel systems that you can sign into and all of this online stuff that we're berotted with every single day. And nothing is for you. They pretend it's for you, but you know, the overall feeling is they're selling something for themselves. And that's the problem. And this is who you're afraid of. This is the typical perception when you say salesperson. When you type in salesperson in Google, this is what comes up. I didn't type in sleazy salesperson. I didn't type in used car salesman. I typed in salesman images, and this is what came up. So even Google has the perception that every salesperson looks like this. And it's a problem. And it's what we have to face when we're in front of a customer. So therefore, we have to know that going in. And then we have to know how to become the anti-salesperson. So how do we become the salesperson that people actually want to talk to? How do we ask for an order without feeling like that salesperson? Because we all felt that we've all been on a Zoom call and we're talking about our product, and the person on the other end seems interested and there's engagement. And then you come to the part where you say, okay, I have to tell them how much it is now. And you get that, again, you get that knot in your stomach and you don't want to feel like the salesperson. And that's what you actually have to overcome, that feeling that has been embedded in your brain since you've been a young person. So for the people in the audience and the people who are going to be watching this on a recording, I want you to ask yourself this question and fill in where it says blank, fill in what your company does. So for example, Torlando, who I know, we are not a scheduling company. We are a what? Fill in the blank in your brain. We are not a scheduling company. We are a blank company. We are not a home improvement company. We are a blank company. Everyone that answers this question almost 100% of the time gets it wrong, because like I'm going to just answer for Torlando. We are not a scheduling company. We are a company that takes care of sales reps or something like that. They come up with what the product does, when really everything starts with customer service. We are not a home improvement company. We are a customer service company. We are not a car dealership. We are a customer service company. Once you start to think that way, your customer is first, then you can fill in the blanks of what your company is, because your company is not your product or your service. Your company is serving a customer. So let's get into a few of these secrets to help people not only lead with customer service, but also figuring out how you can be that salesperson that people enjoy meeting with. And like I mentioned at the beginning, we're going to talk about 3 secrets today that are going to help you do that. So secret number 1, I call it make the switch. And it really is the encompassing feeling of the entire book and really my entire philosophy of, you want to change your mindset as a salesperson. And every time we become a salesperson, oh, we join a company, there's a training process. There's a sales training process, which is fine. Every company needs a training process. But the training process, what's broken about them is they lead with the selling. All they try to train you to do is how to sell the product.
Yeah.
They never train you how to actually talk to a customer,
Mhm.
or they train you closing techniques or objection handling techniques, which are really just reactionary. It's almost like taking medicine to take care of the symptoms, but not the actual problem. Okay. So you have to change your mindset from selling to helping. It's a pretty simple concept. Like I said, not rocket science, but it's emotional science, because if you lead with the problem that you solve and not your product, you will automatically become the salesperson that people will start paying attention to.
Right.
So I'll give you a great example. When I was in my window selling days, I used to sell Andersen windows for many, many years. I was their #1 sales rep. And people, when people asked me what I sold, I didn't tell them I sold windows. I would walk into a house and say, I sell the problem to their drafty living room.
Mhm.
I sell the solution to their high energy bills. Oh, and what is the solution? Well, here, let me show you this window. But so many reps would walk in the house and plop the window on the table, and they just start talking about all the features of the window and up and down and tilts and glass. And they don't even know what the problem of the customer is. They just assume they had them over because they need new windows. But what's the actual problem? Well, the problem is my neck is freezing every time I'm watching television because of the drafty window behind me. That's the problem I solve, and that's what you want to lead with. So when you figure out what your problem is, I just did a video on LinkedIn literally today where I use an example as an electrician. Let's say you're at a networking function and you walk up and you say, hi, what do you do? And the guy says, I'm an electrician. Okay, great. 10 minutes later, hey, what do you do? Another guy says, oh, I'm an electrician. 10 minutes later, you walk up to another guy and says, what do you do? And he says, well, you know, when your fuse blows in your house all the time because your daughter's using her hairdryer, I'm the guy that come over and fix that. I'm an electrician. What electrician are you going to hire if you needed one? You're going to hire the guy who led with the problem that he solved. Even if it wasn't your problem, it's still a problem that he solved. And he's going to stand out among all the bunch of the other electricians that you would meet in that room. So change your mindset from selling to helping, and sell the problem that you solve, not your product or your service. I want to do a little test here. This is a little emotional test for people, again, who's watching now and later on. I want you to take the index finger of your dominant hand, your writing hand, and draw a capital E on your forehead. Do that right now. Okay. Who actually drew the E facing out so I can read it? I think Orlando did that, and I think everybody did. Good. Well, you guys are good, because what this does is this actually shows from an inherent standpoint how empathetic you are. If you drew the E facing out so the person facing you can read it, you are more of an empathetic mindset or an empathetic mold than the person who drew the E facing in. Drew the E facing in doesn't mean you're a bad person. It means you really have to start thinking about empathy a little more, because your immediate reaction is usually the truth. And you drew the E facing yourself. That means you're thinking about yourself more than you're thinking about the person in front of you. So congratulations to the people who drew the E facing out. The people who drew it in, just take a second, an extra beat to think about the person in front of you, because usually if you're just going by your natural reaction, you're thinking about yourself first.
Yeah.
As hard as that is to hear.
Yeah.
Secret 2, I call the helping percentage. And what I mean by this, and we've all heard this, customers don't want to be closed.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to be closed. The term closed is I call it a 4-letter word. I hate the word closed. It's very adversarial.
Yeah.
It's very attack-like we conquered the customer. But this goes back to mindset. It goes back to, how do I start changing my mindset from selling to helping? Well, this is a way to do this. So instead of actually using the term closing percentage, what is your closing percentage? Just change the terminology. Ask, what is your helping percentage? It's amazing what this does psychologically to you as a as an individual rep and also to the tenor of your business. I did some work with a solar company a little while ago, and they had about 12 reps, and it was a very typical sales room. When they did their meetings, they had all the leaders on the board and all the, the rah bro stuff going on. I closed Mrs. Smith last night. I got him last night. It took me 3 hours, but they finally said yes. All this, like, we got them. We were like, there was like a hunting lodge talking about the prey that they killed the day before. And the owner of the company was so into this. He loved it, and he forbid anyone else from that day forward to use the word close. And everything on the board changed from closing percentage to helping percentage, or the top helper this month. And when they would text a sale, they would say, I helped Mrs. Smith today with a $24,000 solar project. And just that one change in that word changes the entire attitude of the entire company, because it goes back to that customer service, customer centric philosophy that you need, rather than closing, which is all about yourself and all about the company. So really good piece of advice as far as to try to, as a way to get to that mindset change. Another way to do this is actually not my, I stole this from Jeff Bezos, but this is called the empty chair method. Jeff Bezos made this popular at Amazon from a corporate standpoint, but it actually comes from a really old psychotherapy treatment, not treatment, but a way to do things. If you were in front of your therapist and you were having an issue with someone in your life, let's say a man was having trouble with his wife, the empty chair method was you'd put an empty chair across from them, and the format would be, okay, Mr. Smith, your wife Joan is sitting there. What do you want to tell her? And you would pretend that she was sitting there, so you'd be able to actually articulate what you wanted to say. And it's easier to do that when you're in person. So what Bezos did was, every time he had a board meeting, he put an empty chair at the table or at the front of the room. And he said, ladies and gentlemen, joining us today in this chair is our Amazon customer. They're going to be here for our entire meeting today. Guess what that does to the meeting? You're no longer talking about customers as prey. You're not talking about customers in negative ways. You actually have to temper what you're saying as if the customer is sitting in the room. And that turns into something that's really good, because you realize saying, well, I would have never said this in front of a customer. So why am I saying it in front of the people I work with? So I've seen this in action. I did it at Anderson Windows. I did it at many other companies. And it really changes how you conduct your meetings. Again, going to the mindset, because you shouldn't have anything to hide at your company. You should be transparent with your customers from what you offer. So have them join your meeting. Have them pretend that they're asking you questions. And then you'll be able to actually get in the mind of your customer more than you ever will. Because when you're just talking about yourself and your company, believe it or not, the customer is sort of forgotten about.
Yeah.
And we don't have customers, we don't have a company.
Yeah. Yeah.
Any questions at all so
I
far?
think that's amazing, Alan. And I agree with you, right? It's how do we become a little bit more other-centered at the end of the day? And I think it kind of goes back to what you were saying before, the self-awareness, just being aware that at the end of the day, we're still talking with people, right? And um, I think it's okay to be aggressive from a process perspective, right? And have that competitive fire. I think to your point and what I hear you saying, words have power and people don't want to be hunted, right? So
Yep.
I think being very, very deliberate with our wordsmithing is a really good practice to be in. On a side note, there was this blip on the radar headline where I guess Burger King launched an ad, and I think they've taken it down, but they launched an ad that says women belong in the kitchen, where they were launching this new program to hire more women or something with women, right? But that was their go-to-market.
Oh my God, I did not see that.
It was just a super quick headline. And so, but to your point, it was one of those things like, oh, that's interesting, right? And so I get it, but maybe not the most savvy approach right now.
Mhm.
So I think words have power at the end of the day, and we need to be very careful with how we choose to use them.
Yeah, and it's all about how the customer feels. Like you have to understand that when it's a sales conversation, they have their gloves on, they have the walls up because they're expecting to be
Yeah.
closed. They're expecting this sales presentation, and they want you to cut to the chase. And when they do that, they're shortchanging themselves because they don't even get a chance to hear about the value of your product because they're wired. It's like when we walk into a store and right away the sales associate comes up and says, "Can I help you?" Without even thinking, we say, "I'm just looking. Leave me alone. I'm just looking." You don't even know why you said it. You even might need help, but you
Yeah.
just say, "I'm just looking," because you have that Riptotrostophobia in you. Stay away from me.
Yeah.
You're a salesperson.
Mhm.
So once we understand that as a person who's selling something, there's ways to actually get around it. And that's why I wrote the book, and that's why we're going over that now.
Yeah.
So secret 4, I call this selling socially, and this has a couple of different components in this. And what I mean by this is not Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn. It has to do with influence and persuasion, how we are as social animals, how we are as social beings.
Mhm.
And it all starts with Aristotle. Aristotle wrote a bajillion years ago that persuasion, the act of persuasion, the feeling of persuasion only occurs when there's 3 separate components of communication involved in a conversation, or when 3 separate components of communication are triggered. The first one is called pathos, and in Greek that means emotion. So that's how you make somebody feel. Logos, data and statistics is what he meant by that. And in today's world, that are features and benefits, usually features and no benefits.
Mhm.
And then ethos has to do with credibility and authority, or basically your company or yourself. Are you trustworthy? Do you have, are you the company or the person I want to do business with? If all 3 of these are happening or they occur during a conversation, you have more of a chance to persuade someone to purchase your product or service. But here's the problem. The majority of sales reps spend way too much time on logos,
Mhm.
like 80% of a conversation. This has been done. There was a really good author named Carmine Gallo. He wrote a book called Talk Like TED. I highly recommend it. He looked at 2,500 TED Talks, and he broke the TED Talks into these 3 categories. So anytime they said a word or a sentence that was emotion, he put a check mark. Was logos, he put a check mark. And turns out that the top 10 TED Talks of all time, all of them with 5 million views or more, the top 10 had the following formula. They were only 15% authority or about themselves. They were 25% statistics or features. And they were 60% emotion. As a salesperson, if you can follow this formula, you'll sell more stuff. Just guaranteed. It'll happen overnight. The problem is most sales reps spend 60 to 70% on logos, the other 20 to 25% on ethos, and then 5% on emotion. Or some of them don't even talk about the emotional feeling you can get by purchasing. And what I mean by emotion, I get this question a lot, is, okay, what do you mean, Allan? What do you mean by emotion? Well, emotion is telling stories, but here's a good way to look at it. And I use this example. I used to sell sunrooms when I was in my 20s. And I learned very quickly that people could care less. Like I had to walk into a house and try to sell a $50,000 sunroom in 2 hours. Not an easy thing to do. The training, all they taught you at the training was everything about the sunroom, the aluminum thickness, the glass energy efficiency, the hardware, the rollers, the thickness of the roof, everything. And that's how I was supposed to sell the product. Nobody cared about that. But when I started saying, imagine Mr. and Mrs. Jones sitting in your backyard with a cup of coffee, looking out the glass the back door of your new sunroom watching the birds. Nothing to do with the actual features of the sunroom. It was all about the emotion. So if you put the customer in the position of what it's going to feel like after they own your product or service, you're more than halfway home, and you're so far ahead of anyone else that's been talking to them. And you can do this with anything. Like if you're in a commodity type business, like let's say, or, telecom or copy machines, where everyone and their uncle sells the same stuff and everyone's kind of right around the same price. All you need to do is focus on emotion of owning that machine over the next one, and you will make the sale more than you won't.
Mm-hmm. Anything in your research, Allan, that talks about the why behind that symptom? Because I agree with you, right? Companies will say, oh, we do onboarding or we do sales training, but it's not sales training, it's product training.
Mhm.
Right. And I don't, I'm curious about your take on that.
The why that it's product training in the corporate world.
Versus
It,
how to have a conversation.
yeah, it's always been, the corporate world is based on numbers,
Yeah.
and they're okay with product training. If you just train product wise, you're going to run into people who there's a handful of people who you can sell just a product to, especially if it's B2B and you're dealing with the buyer or the account manager, that where the emotion may not come into play. But more often today, you're dealing with a human being rather than just a buyer. But it's always been that way because the corporate world thinks that a 25% or 30% closing team is successful, and they base their numbers on that. And that's
Yeah.
pathetic.
Oh.
So I always look at it from the other side of the glass, because even at the companies I used to work with, if you closed 30%, you were a good salesperson. For me, if I saw 100 people and 70 of them told me no, I would ready to jump off a building. Like, are you kidding me? How is that successful? But that's how they sales team with a bunch of leads. The leads are good enough for they can close 30%. There'll be a couple of good guys or girls that can close 40%, maybe. And then everyone else is going to quit after 18 months because they can't handle 70% rejection every single day. And it's just a vicious cycle that keeps going. And the smart companies are realizing that it's not sustainable for the long haul. You can keep dumping more money and more money into leads, but the smaller companies, the solopreneurs of the world, they need to take on this approach where it is human centered, emotional centered, and not just based on numbers. And they're the ones that are going to be successful, because they're the ones that the customers are going to feel good about doing business with, leave good reviews online, and refer you to their friends and family, which is what you want. You don't want a churn and burn sales system.
Agreed.
So that's how I would answer that question.
Okay. I agree.
Okay. So there's three types of influence and persuasion that I'm going to talk about today. There's really 7 scientific ones, but I'm going to focus on these 3. So one is called authority, and I call that be the expert. One we all know about is reciprocation. People naturally feel obligated to reciprocate. And then the other one is called social proof, where customers are more comfortable being part of a tribe. We are tribal animals. We like to be in groups. So what is authority? Authority means that people perceive you as the expert in what you do. Okay. And there are ways to do that. One of the biggest ways today is to put organic content out on social media that provides value. So once they see you 2 or 3 times a week talking about different things that helps with sales or helps with scheduling, whatever it is, you certainly become the authority. But there's different ways to do it as well. Even when you talked about words before, Dionne, words are so important, and small changes in words can make a big difference. So here's an example that I'm going to give you. Let's say we're going back to the networking function now, but instead of meeting electricians, I'm going to walk up and I meet Joe Smith. He gives me his business card, and Joe is a lampshade consultant. And about an hour later, I walk up and I meet Sally, and she gives me her business card, and she's a lampshade consultant as well. But her business card says senior lampshade consultant. So about 2 months goes by and I wake up one morning, I'm like, oh crap, I got to buy my lampshades. I don't remember Joe or Sally to save my life, but I do remember I have their business card somewhere. So I dig them both out. Who am I calling for the lampshade?
Yeah.
I'm calling Sally
Mhm.
because Sally has senior on her card. And Sally could have been selling lampshades for 10 minutes and Joe could have been in the business for 30 years. I'm still calling Sally because the perception to me, simply from how she positioned herself, is that she's more of an expert than Joe is. So if you can do that, you can do that on social media. You can, obviously you're not going to lie or make stuff up, but if you've been working with a company, you can call yourself senior, you can call yourself tenured or whatever you want to do, but position yourself as someone that the customer is going to perceive as an expert because they would rather talk to an expert than someone who's a rookie or someone who's not in the business as long again, it comes down to perception.
Mhm.
Reciprocation. One of my favorite acts of persuasion, because when you do reciprocation from a genuine standpoint, it just feels good. But it not only feels good to you, it feels great to the person you're reciprocating to. But here's how powerful reciprocation is. And this is my favorite story ever of reciprocation. So I'm not sure how many people, I don't know if you guys are old enough to remember a group called the Hare Krishnas,
Yeah.
or you may have heard of them. But the Hare Krishnas were a religious group, cult, whatever you want to call them, back in the 70s. And their whole business model to make money was from donations, like most religious organizations. But instead of going to a church, they actually went out into the public and they solicited donations. The problem was they were dressed really weird and not approachable. They were in these long gowns, they shaved their heads. Some of them had like one ponytail, some of them played drums. They were really like way out there. So this person would approach you, and of course, most of the time people said, get away from me. So the first 2 years they did it, their reciprocation rate, meaning the amount of people they walked up to and actually gave a donation, was less than 1/2 of 1%. So the leader of the group at that time said, well, we can't, this is not sustainable. We have to come up with something else. And as a group, they came up with this idea that all of the people that they had walking around were going to hand a daisy, one little flower. They were going to hand it to the person who was approaching them, or who they were approaching, without saying anything. And they started going in airports and train stations and bus stations where a lot of people were. And they would walk up and they would put out their hand with a flower. And you automatically, as a human being, for the most part, you're going to take it. It's a flower. You're not going to not take it. You take the flower and then they say, thank you. I hope you enjoy the flower. Would you like to donate to the Hare Krishna Society? Guess what their guess what their success rate went up to after they started doing that? 97%. So the first time, less than one person out of 100 donated. The second time, when they added the daisy, 97 out of 100 people reciprocated. And there's some fascinating stuff. Like there were times where they actually filmed them, like in an airport, and there would be people like late for a flight or just mad at their airport experience, and you can just tell that they're angry and walking fast. And they would give them a flower. They would stop and grab the flower, like surprised. They would ask for the donation, and even angry, they would like reach into their pocket and throw the money in the bucket and then walk away. But that's the power of reciprocation. So how do you do this in a sales situation that's genuine?
Yeah.
Be appreciative of your appointment. That's the best thing I can tell you. Always appreciate anyone that's given you the time for an appointment. If it's face-to-face, I used to get these little tiny, cool little notebook things that I would just print myself for $2 each or whatever. Every time I had a window appointment, I would just walk in and genuinely say, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, I just want to thank you for having this appointment. I know you could be doing a lot of different things. This is just a token of my appreciation. And it wasn't because I wanted them to buy anything. It was because I was appreciative of the fact that they set the appointment. And it doesn't mean you're always going to make the sale, but what it does mean usually is they're going to reciprocate with their time. They're going to, the wall now came down. You're no longer that typical salesperson. You're a little bit different, and they're probably going to start paying attention to you. This doesn't mean tchotchkes that you get at a one of those home shows or those car shows where you walk past every booth and they throw pens and everything. That's not reciprocation, because that stuff does not have a genuine feel to it.
Yeah.
But and reciprocation doesn't have to be a gift either. I used to, if I saw a bike in the middle of a driveway, I would just move the bike to the side. I'd bring in their mail or pull up their garbage or shovel their walkway. All of these little things, this human to human action, will turn you into the anti-salesperson, which is what we're trying to get to from beginning. And you can use reciprocation to do that. And there it is. The human brain is wired. It's really almost 100% of the time to reciprocate when something is given to you.
Mm-hmm.
And the final one I call social proof. And social proof is very simple. People feel more comfortable doing something when other people like them did or are doing the same thing. So it's just like walking down the street and people start looking up, or you see one person look up, you look up, and then before you know it, 50 people are looking up because they all feel comfortable looking up because someone else is looking up. So how do you use social proof? Well, social proof can be used in a variety of different ways, testimonials being the number one. But here's the thing about testimonials. Testimonials, you don't want them to be generic. So let's say you work for a large company. I've seen so many reps just walk in with, like, say they're in Rhode Island like I am, and they're talking to someone, they're talking to a nail salon, and they show a testimonial from a nail salon in Texas. That has no feeling for that owner of that nail salon. If they showed a testimonial from another nail salon in Rhode Island, now that's social proof, because they're feeling like a tribe. So you can use like I have here, nearby towns, jobs that are similar to theirs, companies that are similar to theirs, like Turlando. If you're scheduling service, if you've got 10 painting contractors using it and you're talking to an 11th, you're going to talk about those 10 because they're all within the same area. You can use professions. You talk to a doctor, mention other doctors have used this product or service. One example that I've used personally, I actually was hired, this was last year, by this young guy who wanted to help. He worked for this, what do you call it? Like a men's warehouse, had all these suits in it. And he just wanted some sales help. And we figured that a way to use social proof in that situation was to use the stature of the person walking in. So for example, when a tall athletic person walked in, or maybe a short kind of stocky guy walked in, instead of when the customer would walk in, you'd immediately be overwhelmed because there's 5,000 suits there. But he would walk up and say, you know what, guys who look like you, who are shaped like you, or as tall like you, they tend to buy one of these 5 suits over here. Yep. Now the 5,000 suits disappear. The 5 suits that other people like me bought are in front of me. And now my selection is one of 5 instead of one of 5,000. And I felt much more comfortable buying one of those suits because other guys like me did it. So that's a good example of using social proof when you're in front of a customer. And like I have here, facts and feelings. People want to feel like other people like themselves purchased your product or service. So at the end of the day, this is the perception that customers have of salespeople. They're going to give you a hug, but while they're hugging you, they're going to take the money right out of your back pocket. And that's what they're afraid of. And this is what you have to avoid, because at the end of the day, you want your customers feeling like this after they talk to you. And how is that for timing?
I think that was great, Allan. Thank you so much, everybody. For those of you that have joined us today, please connect with Allan directly on LinkedIn. And you can follow up with him. He's got an amazing book that you should definitely participate in, and a few other things. Have the conversation, right? So that's what we're here to do, is to get better and learn and earn more our way through this wonderful life we have. So be sure to do that. Be sure to connect, like I said, connect with Allan, subscribe to SalesClass. You'll see some more content there. And Allan, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording now.